What up, TCK Potters? I'm your host, Sky Guasco, joined always by my man, Lukas Kaser, and you are tuned into the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Candlestick Kids, leave a rate and review anywhere you're listening to your podcast, and follow us on IG at fantasyfootball_TCK Pod and on Twitter at TCK_pod. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get into it. Welcome back, TCK Potters. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. We are getting into the final stretch before the TCK Draft Guide drops next Monday, July 6th. We're very excited for it. We've got pre-orders rolling in. If you have not yet pre-ordered your version of 3 different options of the TCK Pod Draft Guide, make sure you click the link in the description and sign up for that. Right now, it literally takes 30 seconds to fill out a couple bullet points, give us your email address, and let us know which package you would like. We are fine-tuning those. We've taken a couple of episodes off last week to make sure we got the fine touches in it, and we're very, very excited. Lukas, how are you feeling, man? I know it's been a dogfight. You're not only involved with the TCK brand, but you also have the Fantasy Stock Exchange, and you're doing guest spots with other podcasts, and you have a new YouTube channel, and you got a lot of shit going on, man, not to mention the rest of this world going on right now. So how you holding up, brother?
Doing good. If the link in the description works, and I'm going to say hopefully if you just type in tckpod.com, you can order it from there. I say hopefully because I think I figured out how to do that. And if not, don't get mad at me. Just go to the link down below. But if it's easier for you to, I don't know, just put in your credit card or debit card or whatever it takes on there, tckpod.com. It has all the information. It's basically what the link is down below. Just paste it on to the front page of the website that you will be using for the draft guide. So that is there. And next Monday, whenever you're hearing this, it's coming out on July 6th. I'm ready to go. I think we're getting almost finished with it. We've been working hard on it.
Awesome, man. Very excited. We have a lot of contributors also helping us out. So we'll be giving shout outs, of course, accordingly once it drops and we get everything fine tuned. So those of you listening in that know you've been a contributor to our podcast and to our draft guide, we much appreciate it, and quite literally could not get all of this done without your help. So you know who you are. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. All right, man, we're going to jump into kind of some quicker series here this week just to knock out a couple some fun episodes here. We've been dialing so much into the analytics. We've been dialing so much into player previews, team previews, scheduling, mock drafts over the last couple of weeks. We're going to just have some fun today. We're going to go over a early version of our gamers, which if you listen to fantasy footballers, they're my guys. A lot of other people call them, whatever they want. These are basically our fantasy MVPs, if you will. These are the guys that we personally want to try to make sure are on every fantasy team that we draft, of course, assuming that the draft falls that way so we can get them. So we're going to pick a quarterback each, a running back, a wide receiver, and a tight end each here for our gamers episode. And then we're also going to have an alternate backup. So the way I kind of thought about this was everybody wants one of the top end guys, right? Like everybody wants Christian McCaffrey. The reality is if you don't get a first 2 pick, you're not going to get CMC, period. So who else in those rounds? Who else do you want in the middle tiers? Who do you want in the late tiers if you don't get them that you will see with the upside? So let's dive into it, man. Let's start with the quarterbacks. I'll let you go first here. Who is your gamer as of early July here? Obviously, we're gonna double back in about a month and a half here. I'm gonna bring on Daniel. Longtime listeners know Daniel. He and I started the podcast a couple of years ago. He loves to do this with me. The breakdowns here we've done the last couple of years. So he's gonna jump back on in August. We're gonna do this again for real. But let's look at an early version of our gamers. Let's start with the quarterback position. Lukas, you're up first.
Yep, the first one, and I really grew on him. When I think of it as a fantasy aspect only, it's Gardner Minshew. He's going as the QB 24 to 26. I didn't put the round number because that kind of just all depends on the what site you're pulling it from. But he's basically not going drafted or just a late QB guy, you can say. And I say I kind of grew on him in a fantasy landscape because I don't think he's actually that good of a quarterback. And he probably won't be the Jaguars quarterback coming next year. But really it comes down to one thing. He's the QB 26. He was arguably just as good as the offensive rookie of the year last year. The defense only got worse, and they have the first 6 weeks, they have the easiest pass efficiency defense strength of schedule by a long shot. They are the Niners in that stretch, weeks 1 through 6, have the second easiest, and I can't say a number of easier or not, but if you look on the graphic on Sharp Football Stats, it is a pretty significant jump up in terms of from the Niners to the Jaguars. They play the Colts, the Titans, the Dolphins, Bengals, Texans, and Lions on that stretch. And if you remember watching any of the Dolphins, Bengals, Texans, and Lions secondary and the Colts, I'm not going to lie, last year, it was bad. It was a fantasy gold mine. So they just mix that in with a team that's going to be throwing the ball a lot. They don't want Leonard Fournette there. They made it obvious. And they're just going to ride what is left of that team coming into 2020. And they could easily be a 9-7 team, but it could easily be a 1-15 team. But either way, they're going to be throwing the ball a lot due to negative game script. So, yeah, QB 26, take him as your QB2. And I honestly think he'll be a starting quarterback. I think those 6 weeks, but if he's your QB2, you don't have to worry about streaming for a long time.
Gardner Minshew played 2 less games than Kyler Murray last year, but he was only 500 yards behind him. He had 1 more touchdown and 6 less interceptions. You have to imagine that if Gardner played those 2 extra games that Kyler did, that he would have thrown at least 500 yards over those 2 games. So quite literally, Gardner Minshew on paper had equally or better of a season than Kyler Murray did last year. He also had he was second among rookies last year in his rushing as well, 340 yards, which is a great floor. Didn't score on the ground, but of course that could change anytime. So I love that. I know the commish crew talks about Gardner Minshew a lot, and they like that move. And I agree with you, man. I've kind of started warming up to him as well. I wasn't crazy about him because I think you're right. I think he kind of has that like flailing, like young Brett Favre style about him, which is fun and exciting, but it's also very risky. But for fantasy, we love that, right? I mean, he's got a nice running floor. He can chuck it, and then of course they bring in Jay Gruden, who loves to throw the ball. So they're going to be throwing it all over the yard. I agree with you. Down, game scripts, yada yada. I think that's a great pick late. I'm going to go on the top half of drafts. I'm going to go with Dak Prescott. You and I both have him as number 3 quarterback. Right now in ADP, he's actually going within the top 5 at some point, but even as low as the 5th round, 6th round as well. Now, he signed his franchise tender for $31.4 million, which we all knew was coming. He asked for 40 originally, then 35, settled with 31, plenty of money. He'll be just fine. I think he's the long-term answer there eventually. He had a career high in 2019, throwing for 4,902 yards with 30 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. He also had 6 rushing touchdowns the first 3 years in his career. Last year, it dropped it down to 3, but still a great rushing floor. Finished last year already as the quarterback number 2 on the season for fantasy. And, of course, now they go out and get CeeDee Lamb. Blake Jarwin has another year. They actually have addition by subtraction, in my opinion, getting rid of Jason Witten. I think that helps tremendously. Another year of Tony Pollard, mixing it up there a little bit. Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, obviously, as well. So I think the Cowboys are going to be nasty this year, and I think Dak Prescott, if I miss out on Lamar and Mahomes in the first, it's going to have to be the 2nd round, 3rd round probably. I'm not necessarily reaching for Dak in the 4th or the 5th round, but if he's around in the 5th and I've got 2 stud running backs, 2 stud wide receivers, or a top tight end in that mix, I could see myself going with Dak because I think he has a great floor, steady floor every single week, and a huge weekly upside. And then, of course, he does also run the ball there. So love Dak Prescott there, and you go with Gardner Minshew. We both have the same alternate here. I'll start with him, and then you can kind of piggyback here. Both of us have an alternate of Big Ben. Now, I think this is real simple. Right now, he's going in the 10th round or later, so he is a late-round QB. Just 2 years ago, he was a second. He led the NFL in passing yards. He was a second fantasy football quarterback. And then, of course, he blows out his elbow. The Steelers go to shit. It's a whole thing. He's recovering. He's 38 years old. Nobody knows what to expect, but we do know what the potential of Big Ben is after a 16-plus year career. Juju moving back into the slot, Deontay Johnson, James Washington, now Chase Claypool, a stable of running backs, a great defense. They have the second best schedule according to last year's opponents' rankings. So last year's opponent's record, I should say, coming into 2020, the Ravens have the number 1. The Steelers have the number 2. So everything is lined up for Big Ben if he can stay healthy. I'll let you talk about his beard and everything else. But essentially, I'm thinking if I miss out on, let's say, he's not a top 10 quarterback in my rankings, but if I miss out on the top 10 maybe ranked quarterbacks I feel excited about, I am going to look at Big Ben, I think, along with Matt Stafford, before Daniel Jones, before Gardner Minshew. It's Jared Goff, Jimmy Garoppolo, Ryan Tannehill. I'm going to probably look at Big Ben first if I'm waiting that long anyway, because I just know that the ceiling is literally top 3 to 5, whereas the rest of those guys, I think the ceiling's maybe top 10. So my alternate here, or maybe even my second quarterback, no matter what, I think Big Ben is huge. And again, drafting him that late, if he shits the bed, he gets hurt, it doesn't work out, you cut him and you stream, and you're kind of just fine. But I would rather have Big Ben on my bench than get beat by him by my opponent.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. You're not drafting him like, oh, I hope he comes back. Like if you are taking him in fantasy this year, he's playing the season. He's the starting quarterback, and you can literally go pull any stats from his receivers playing with him, his running backs playing with him, his fantasy finish for him, his passing yards, the team offense for him. It's top 3 in the league, top 5 in the league, top 6 in the league every single year. So to me, it's too easy. It's so much of a no-brainer just to take him because like he's going so well behind his finish. And he came out and said it in an interview, like, I'm not shaving the beard until I'm ready to throw a football. And look, he shaved the beard. He's been throwing. He looks good. So I think this one is going to come back and bite people if they miss on him because they're going to worry about the injury too much. But in a one quarterback league, he's every part of what we wanted Matt Stafford to be last year, or what Matt Stafford was until he got hurt. Just the, I don't know, 9th round guy, 10th round guy that puts up 22 a week, and that's good enough to not have to worry about playing another quarterback. So yeah, I think I don't really know who else to put here because he could be, I guess, my number 1 too. I don't really have a preference, but I think he's one guy that you need to be targeting at QB 14 and round 10. But I could easily see that in some leagues going down to QB 20 because people just don't want to think he's injured still. So yeah, definitely smash that.
Honestly, in most single quarterback mock drafts that I've been doing that are like, let's say 16 rounds for the most part, he's not even getting drafted.
No.
Period. Right. So again, why not? I mean, if I punt quarterback all the way to the end of my draft and I end up with I don't know, let's say I go with Big Ben and even a Derek Carr, a Drew Lock, Tyrod Taylor for the first 4 games, Joe Burrow, something like that. I mean, I feel like I can rotate those 2 guys out, and all those quarterbacks are free in drafts right now, right? So if it doesn't work out at the top of your draft, I think that's just fine. And again, if it doesn't work out, you cut them, and you end up having plenty of other options there on the waiver wire. All right, man. Gardner Minshew and Dak Prescott as our early gamers this year, and then we both have the alternate of Big Ben. Let's go down to the running backs, man. I'll let you kick it off again. Who is your early running back gamer?
Yep. So mine is Austin Eckler, and I don't think anyone was down on him, but it's seeming as of late that he, I guess, is not a workhorse anymore. I guess he's not going to be apparently Justin Jackson 7th round pick and 4th round pick. I can't even remember who they freaking took.
Joshua Kelly.
Yeah, Josh Kelly are taken away from like the most efficient running back last year. So really what it comes down to, okay, so say he goes into whatever, say just there's 120 like vacated rushing attempts roughly around there. Okay, I don't think a 4th round rookie is going to take 120 rushing attempts right away. So like check. I've mentioned before that he played primarily in the slot when Melvin Gordon came back. That favors Tyrod Taylor. That favors a new quarterback on a new system. That favors Justin Herbert. We see slot receivers or flanker receivers, whatever you want to call it, quarterback proof because they don't run routes that you need chemistry with because it's just the quick hitters. Keenan Allen this year, he's being super undervalued because people think that the quarterback play is going to affect the 6'3" slot receiver. Like, no, that's why Allen Robinson is so good because he plays in the slot. It doesn't matter who his quarterback is. So really this just comes down to obviously he's not going to put up probably what he did the first 4 games. Like, he's not going to be the RB2. He could, but he's probably not going to be the RB2. I'm not banking on that. But he's going at the RB, I don't even know, 12, I think I put on the
RB12.
RB12. Yeah, I clicked off the screen. Like, I don't – he's my RB1. Like, I'm pumped, and you're getting him as like an RB1/2 basically. So you could easily get him as your RB2, and you're getting a guy that's scoring 15-plus points a game. So I think he's one guy that – second round, even round 1, because obviously if you have him round 1, you basically have 2 first-round picks because you're picking around the turn roughly. So I think he's definitely a smash for sure. And I don't know, I guess my thing is I'm just fading the whole, like, he's quarterback proof, he's not a full-time workhorse, all that crap because Phillip Rivers was not good last year either. So I think people aren't looking into that. They're looking into that too much.
My biggest concern is that, most of his production came through the pass game, which I know is great for fantasy football, but it's just a matter of actually sustaining almost 1,000 yards receiving. We see Christian McCaffrey do it. We saw, Saquon do it. Alvin Kamara's doing it too. And maybe just Austin Eckler just is that kind of guy. And if he does anything close to what he did last year, then we just know that he's legit, and that's awesome. I'm a little bit hesitant, and I will say that I don't want Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, CEH definitely. I'm trying to think of some other guys up in that higher level. Maybe Kenyon Drake. I don't want them as my RB1, but I would be thrilled to have them as my RB2. And if I'm in like the 10th pick, and I go maybe one of those guys and I double up, or if I go for me personally, it would be like a Mixon, a Chubb maybe, or somebody like that. And then I turn around and I hit that RB2 on the back end and I start my draft with somebody like that. I think that's huge upside. So I'm with you there. I think Austin Eckler's great. I'm a little hesitant to have him as my one, definitely. I won't be drafting him in the first round, but if I fall to him, or if he falls to me, I should say, in the back of the second round, in the middle of the second round, I'm already good at running back and I can double up. I think that would be great there. Okay, I'm going to go with my man, Alvin Kamara. I've talked about Kamara constantly on this podcast. I don't think I need any sort of convincing about this. This is my front end running back. I've got, you and I both have a guy that's like kind of more in the middle to late tiers that we'll talk about here in a second as an alternate. In the first, let's see, 2 weeks ago, we went through each round of a mock draft at current ADP, and we talked about our favorite picks for each round. And I picked Alvin Kamara of all the first rounders outside of Saquon and CMC, of course. Alvin Kamara is my favorite first rounder of all positions. I just think that regression is going to be in his favor this year. He is playing at about 75% last year. He is one of the, if not the most elusive running back in the league. Fantastic basically a wide receiver playing at the running back position. He had 13 touchdowns as a rookie, 18 the year after that. Last year, that was basically cut in half to just 6. I think that he's going to have minimum 10, probably 12, maybe even 15 in this offense. Latavius Murray is the man, and he is one of my top handcuffs for sure. But if Alvin Kamara is out there and he's healthy, Latavius Murray is going to be a change of pace back, not the goal line back, surprisingly. Alvin Kamara has led the league the last couple of years in running back targets within the red zone and the end zone. I just think in this offense with what he delivers as a multi-use running back, I just think is a no-brainer. So Alvin Kamara is – on the next episode, we're going to talk about some of our early kind of hot takes. And I'm going to get into this a little bit deeper then. But I will just kind of spoiler alert a little bit that of all of the guys who could potentially be the number one running back overall outside of CMC and Saquon, I think it's Alvin Kamara. I really do think he has that ability with the touchdown upside and the usage in this offense. So for me, if I have the third pick or he falls to me at the 7th pick or something, I would be thrilled. But for me, Alvin Kamara is my gamer as of right now for the running back position. All right, man, let's jump down to the alternates. I'll let you go first on this one as well.
Yeah, mine is Zach Moss, and I think this one is going to be a league winner type player. I mean, he's going as the RB48, probably right around there in most formats. So he's going as an RB4-5 range. And it really comes down to one thing, that if you I guess in the draft guide, there'll be the teammate battle. So I had Devin Singletary versus Frank Gore last year. So in the red zone alone, Frank Gore, he started one less game than Devin Singletary. He played a lot less games. Not played a lot less games, but he played a lot less snaps than Singletary did at the end of the year. And he had 7 more attempts inside the 20 and 9 more attempts inside the 5 for not playing as the full-time role. That'll be Zach Moss's role right out of the gate because they came out and said he's going to play Frank Gore's role. And if you go down and break out in that write-up, you'll see a chart that I made, the per-game numbers for the whole year. Singletary only averaged 1.15 more rushing attempts per game. That turned into more yards, obviously, but I hope so. I hope you're out rushing on a yards per carry basis. The 37-year-old Frank Gore. Obviously, Singletary won the targets, all that stuff. But really, to me, the red zone carries is where it comes down to. I think that Zach Moss will slowly eat into the receiving work. But even if you give him 15 touches a game, I think that's plenty of enough to be an RB4 with the red zone work. That a guy that the way I look at it is like the Bills. I'm not saying they're a bad team, but they're not a good enough team to manage a committee, if that makes sense. Like whoever the hot hand is will stay in there. If Zach Moss is running wild, like they're going to keep him in there. They just don't care enough to have a committee. Like they use Frank Gore exclusively the first couple of weeks, and then Singletary started playing good. They went strictly to Singletary. Not that Frank Gore played bad, just because Singletary was playing so good. So I think there's a lot of room for upside. And RB 48, what's that, like 8 points per game? Probably when it comes down to it. So I think he can definitely return that.
Another boost to Zach Moss is one of the I don't know, one of my favorite pieces that I've read so far over the summer is an article by my girl Michelle over at Ball Blast Fantasy Football. Check out the ladies over there; they do really great work. She basically the broke down the coaching tendencies for Brian Dable and Kelly Skipper, who are the offensive coordinator and running backs coach for the Bills. And essentially, just a small snippet from her is Brian Dable and Kelly Skipper, the running backs coach for the Buffalo Bills and the offensive coordinator, both have extensive history favoring bigger backs over smaller backs, even if those bigger backs have a name. So that is essentially favoring Zach Moss over Singletary. Brian Dable's offenses have been top 10 in rushing attempts 6 out of the last 7 years that he was the offensive coordinator in the NFL. Now, he spent a couple years at Alabama as well, so those don't count, obviously, being in the NFL. But I think Zach Moss is going to get plenty of work. He's 2 inches taller, 20 pounds heavier. He's going to get those red zone looks that Frank Gore couldn't capitalize on. Another thing interesting that is kind of pulling me off of Josh Allen a little bit, which is a different conversation. But essentially, she also broke down basically 4 touchdowns that Josh Allen ended up scoring that he shouldn't have because Frank Gore couldn't get it done. So that's another ode to Zach Moss here. Here's just a couple examples. So these are 4 touchdowns that Josh Allen should have scored, or I'm sorry, 4 touchdowns that Josh Allen did score rushing after Frank Gore failed. So Gore had 2 chances, failed. Josh Allen scored on 4th down. Frank Gore had 3 chances, failed. Allen scored on 4th down again. Gore had he was stopped on 1st and 1, so on the 1-yard line. Allen scored on 2nd down, and then Gore had 2 chances, failed. Allen scored on 3rd down. So those are 3 opportunities that if you take those away from Allen, that drops him down significantly and boosts Frank Gore. I just think that a younger version, 15 years younger, Zach Moss gets it done here than Frank Gore. So I think that's a great call, man. You and I went pretty in depth with the Bills on a previous podcast, and I actually just wrote up a big write-up myself on the Bills that you can catch in the draft guide, but we will be breaking it down, and obviously Lukas just previewed his player preview and comparison there. So I think Zach Moss is a great get, whether you have Singletary or not. He's an excellent 0 RB target as well if you end up that way in your drafts. My alternate running back is going to be David Montgomery going as the 25th running back in about the 4th round. 4th round, I think, is a perfect spot for him. You don't need him as your RB1. He's not going to be RB1, but he could be, again, a 0 RB1, or he could be an RB2 with 2 other good wide receivers there. I think he's going to get a boost in the pass game this year. I think, in his 2nd season, he's going to be just fine. He actually had a really nice rookie season kind of quietly, but he was kind of just overshadowed because of the Mitch Trubisky experiment and how shitty the Bears actually were. But he had over 1,000 total yards, 250 touches, 7 touchdowns. And I think he could definitely do all of that again this year and then some. So I expect him to be closer to 1,200, 1,400 total yards and, 8 to 10 touchdowns. And if you're getting that, with, 30, 35 receptions, I think that David Montgomery could be a real nice pick there. So my alternate gamer is going to be David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. All right, man, let's take just a quick second to, again, shout out the draft guide before we get into the wide receivers and the tight ends. We are dropping the draft guide next Monday, July 6th. Make sure you go and pre-order that. If you haven't already, you can go to tckpod.com and you can sign up on the website itself, or you can click the link in the bio in the description right now. It literally takes 30 seconds to a minute. All we need is your email address, your name, please, a couple bullet points to click, and then let us know which package you would like, and we'll get those out to you in just 2 weeks, man. We're very, very excited about that. So thank you again to everybody supporting us and all the contributors that have put in a bunch of work behind the scenes. All right, brother, why don't we jump into our wide receivers here? Who is your wide receiver gamer as of now?
Yeah, my first one, people probably know, Julian Edelman. I don't need to break down all the stats again. I mean, wide receiver 37, what's that? Maybe 6 points a game, 7 point, no, probably like nine. He's going to catch 8 balls a game, so like chalk that up. It's a no brainer here. I in the hot takes episode and in the draft guide, probably not on launch, but closer to middle of July, there'll be a big article titled "What is Upside." I know I've harped on it before, but it'll be a very in depth as to why people overthink fantasy points and how to win fantasy games. So be on the lookout for that. But I mean, it's just him. If you listen to our wide receiver rankings video, I believe that's when I went on my rant as to why Tom Brady did not play good because of league average or below league average, and every single quarterback stat is good. Then Joe Flacco is legit a Hall of Famer, and I think Trevor Siemian might be in that category as well too. So just take Edelman. He's your wide receiver 3, and he was the wide receiver 6 last year with average quarterback play. So just put 2 and 2 together there. Take a guy that gets you 10 plus points in your flex and go win your league.
Love it, man. Nice case. Nice case from my old man Edelman. I like that. All right, man. I'm going to go with DK. In the 5th round, DK Metcalf, I think personally could just be. First of all, I just think he's going to be the number 1 in Seattle, and I think he's just going to be a top 10 wide receiver this season. Last year, 58 receptions, 900 yards. He had 100 targets, 58 catches. 58% reception percentage is fucking terrible. He's going to be much, much better than that. He was a quote unquote raw receiver last year, but he had a knee scope 2 weeks before the combine. He came out, busted the combine, immediately kind of like set the world on fire, had these Julio Jones, Calvin Johnson specs, whatever. Came out, he was on fire, but pretty rough. And he and Russell Wilson in year 1 had a tough time connecting. I think that he gets another 100 targets at least this year. Let's boost that up to 70%. That's 70 receptions. That 900 yards is going to go to 1,200, I think, pretty easily. And he could have double-digit touchdowns as well. My favorite thing about this is DK Metcalf, big body, 6'3". He led the NFL as a rookie. He led the NFL with end zone targets with 13. He was ahead of Mike Evans, Kenny Golladay, Auden Tate was surprisingly up there at number 4, DJ Chark, Adam Thielen, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen for the next top 8 wide receivers there. So I just love the upside here from DK. I think he's going to be much more of a first down pickup. He could take a slant to the house with the speed. He's going to go up and get it. Russell Wilson's going to trust him. I think the Seahawks aired out quite a bit more this year. I know that you're stoked on Lockett, and we'll hear about that in just a little bit. And I don't dislike Lockett as much as I used to here on the podcast. I'm definitely putting respect on the man finally. However, I just think DK is a specimen, and I would rather take the chance on the huge upside of DK than counting on the consistent efficiency of Tyler Lockett personally. So I'm going to go with DK Metcalf here as my wide receiver gamer. Why don't you jump in here and defend yourself on your alternate?
Yeah, and it's not so it's Tyler Lockett. It's not that I hate DK. I think it's just being blown out of proportion what this wide receiver group really is. I think there's a lot of the way people evaluate wide receivers is like there has to be an alpha. There has to be one guy. There has to be the target hog, blah, blah, blah. But like when it really comes down to it, like I'm sorry to say this, but a 5'8" utility receiver and I don't know how huge man alpha DK Metcalf they're not competing for roles. Like they're not competing for like they are a receiver and a receiver for Russell Wilson. I'm not even gonna say 1A, 1B because they don't need it's not Godwin and Evans per se. It kind of is, but like not really. They play 2 completely different roles in itself. So I think really it just comes down to like Lockett, he's going below DK in most leagues, and I think it's just because people don't like I don't know, like it's the whole upside thing. Like he was like the RB16 I think last year, like RB12 the year before that. I probably should have pulled these up, but like I faded him last year because like the TD percentage is not reliable. There's no way he can do it again. But then I failed to look at Russell Wilson's career and how he sits right around 6.5% TD rate every year, which that should drop, but it's obviously not dropping because
Which is
Russell
phenomenal,
Wilson.
by the way.
And he has to throw that to someone, and it's Lockett every single year. You see the connection in games. You're like, how did Lockett just get open? He's 5'8", make that catch, and just every single year, this is what happens. And I think he's going to keep falling. Because I think once draft season rolls around, people are going to think that DK is taking over, which he could. But DK ran like 3 routes in his route tree last year. Yes, he can develop those more this year, but I don't think this is a year that DK turns into. I would probably say Michael Thomas. I think that's a close comp to me and how they kind of play football. But I think for now they're just two Seattle wide receivers that are both good fantasy values. Maybe next year we start to lower Lockett, but I think Lockett's still the primary target for Russell Wilson. I don't even care if they don't throw. They could throw the ball 5 times a game, and they'll probably score 4 touchdowns, 4 passing touchdowns. So I'm just going to choose to not fade him for the pass run split and not fade him because I think there has to be one receiver for Russell Wilson.
Cool. And, right now with the ECR, DK is 25th receiver. Tyler Lockett's 22. So they're actually pretty close to each other. But I think you're right. In home leagues, the allure of DK Metcalf, his workouts, the whole situation. I mean, he's just a fucking monster, dude, and he's fun to root for. I think is going to in home leagues is going to boost DK's ADP and then fade consequently Tyler Lockett. So I think DK Metcalf runs 4 routes this year and therefore fucking smashes. So I'm going to take DK Metcalf. But I could see, Lucas, we know you already as the early running back guy for your mock drafts. I think you're going to end up with about 4 running backs in every draft, and then you're going to go Lockett and Edelman as your receivers and just fucking crush it.
It works every year, and everyone be like, "That's so bad, no upside." And then I'm sitting there with 120 points a week because they get me my 10, and I just move on with the week.
There you go. The man won the TCK Pod Listener League last year, folks. So he knows a couple of things here. All right, man. I'm going to jump into mine. It's Juju, and again, just to pair this up with Big Ben. I know you and I are high on Juju. People are starting to come around on Juju too. I think that coming off of last year, he was injured. Big Ben was injured. The Steelers were a shit show. We all know what happened there. But it's like everybody can still kind of taste 2018 with Antonio Brown and Juju and them just lighting up the league, and Juju leading the NFL in yak yards after catch in 2018. The ability for him to, he has 2 97-yard touchdowns. I mean, he's a big play. He's going to run the slant again, the slot again, running slants and over the middle, I think, which is going to be very, very helpful in mismatches there because you're going to have nickel corners that come out only on special packages trying to cover Juju Smith-Schuster, which isn't going to happen. And they also, as incredible as Antonio Brown was, he and Juju were the best wide receiver core that particular season. But I would argue that kind of overall as a wide receiver core with the four guys that they have right now, and Eric Ebron as well, and then running backs out, like the entire offense, I think, is the best maybe that they've had since the 5 games that the Big Ben, Lev, and AB actually played together a few years ago. So I think the Steelers are really going to surprise this year if Big Ben can stay healthy. And with that comes Juju Smith-Schuster, who, if he had anything close to 2018 and 2019, he's probably a top 5 receiver right now. But he didn't. It was a shit show, and it wasn't necessarily his fault. So I think he's fallen right now. He's at the wide receiver 10, but again, I think people are worried about him in the 3rd round. If I got Juju as my wide receiver 3, dude, I would be through the roof. But if I went 2 early running backs, I'd be more than happy to have Juju as my wide receiver 1 as well. So in my opinion, he's a win-win. If I get him as my wide receiver 1 in the 3rd round, I'm stoked with 2 running backs. If I get him as my wide receiver 3, I think that's just insane. If I were to somehow scoop, let's say, Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin, and Juju Smith-Schuster at 0 RB, you could do worse there. So I like Juju a lot as my alternate wide receiver there. So DK Metcalf and Juju for myself, and Julian Edelman and Lockett for Lucas. All right, brother, let's get into the tight ends and we'll get out of here, man. Who was your early gamer at the tight end position?
Yeah, he's very early, and that's Travis Kelce at the tight end 1. I went with this strategy of the positional advantage, and I love Kittle, but I think, like I mentioned on the tight end rankings, Kelce's still just ahead of him. I just think Kelce's still that tier 1. Kittle now with Debo out, because that was before Debo, that could raise him up. I just don't know how well that'll – I just don't think it's like, oh, Debo's out, okay, Kittle now, because now teams are going to be guarding Kittle more. But that's not like saying fade Kittle by any means. But I just think Kelce's still the top guy. Depending on your league, end of round one, middle round two, early round three. I don't really know where he goes, but I still think it's such a good, safe pick at a position that, like even Kittle, you'd have to worry about some games because he's not a target hog in an offense that you know is going to be passing the ball 40 times a game. But Kelsey just, you just know, like he's the wide receiver one on this team. He's the main red zone threat. You don't have to really worry about injury or inconsistency like Tyreek. You just know what you're getting with him. So I think he's a guy that I'll stick with my tight end. Not, I mean, he's early, but I would say I stick with my securing my tight end strategy again this year because it worked out for me last year.
I think it's a great call, man. And obviously, if you're going to go with that, Kelsey's the man. Um, I think Kittle is very, very close to number one, if not number one. We've had this discussion a couple times on the podcast. In Dynasty, we're both going to go with Kittle, just for the long term. Although we had that, fantasy regime league, which we'll keep breaking down throughout the summer, where we actually went Kelsey in Dynasty. But I do think that Kittle is going to get more attention this year now that people know that he's for real. But with Debo out, at least for the first couple of weeks, I think that's going to be huge for Kittle. Now, that being said, I think Brandon Ayuk really takes off this year as well. If you go Kittle this year and you go early like that with that second round capital, maybe third round capital, and Kittle is just fucking absolutely on fire through the first 4 weeks, which could happen. And then we get Debo coming back. I would probably recommend as of right now that you sell Kittle if you can for an RB1. You could probably get a top 10 running back or top 5 receiver for Kittle at that point because of positional advantage. But I do think once Debo comes back, it'll level out a little bit. And what Kelsey has that Kittle doesn't is the just peppering of targets, which I think is going to help. Kittle makes a lot more happen after the catch. But just getting that sure work constantly, I think, is in Kelsey's favor. So love me some Kittle, but I think you're spot on there with Kelsey. I'm going to go with Mark Andrews here. And Mark Andrews, I think, is a little polarizing this year because I think he's that guy this year who you're either all in, which I think I am. You're either all in that he can do it again. Last year was just the first of many, many great seasons coming up for Mark Andrews. Or you're sitting there thinking that he's Darren Waller, which I think is going to happen with Darren Waller, where, it happened, but it's not going to happen again. It was kind of a fluke season, or it was just an opportunity situation, and it's not going to happen again this year. Well, I disagree. Last year, Mark Andrews had a 41% snap per game. Right. So he was in 41% of snaps per game. That was with Hayden Hurst and Nick Boyle. Hayden Hurst obviously now is in Atlanta. So that opens up 41% snap share as well. 30 receptions, 350 yards, and 2 touchdowns that Hayden Hurst has is up for grabs at this point. They did bring in 2 slot receivers, Devin Duvernay and James Prochet, which I think are going to be great. Willie Snead is still around. Miles Boykin is still around. Hollywood Brown is still around. They bring in J.K. Dobbins. They have a ton of weapons. But in my opinion, I think Lamar Jackson right now is most comfortable, like Wentz with Ertz, most comfortable throwing to Mark Andrews, who led tight ends last year in touchdowns, and I think he's going to have a huge opportunity. The biggest thing, too, is with Lamar Jackson and just where he likes to throw the ball. The Ravens trio of tight ends combined last year for 155 receptions, 1,500 yards, and 14 touchdowns. So that's all 3 guys, but most of that was Mark Andrews. Now, to your point, and all those numbers basically ended up being 58% of Lamar Jackson's completion, 48% of his passing yards, and 38% of his passing touchdowns. So a huge chunk, a third or a half of Lamar Jackson's production through the air came from the tight end position. Now, obviously, Hurst is gone, so we get and Nick Boyle's basically a blocking tight end. He was on 70% of snaps, but he only had 30 receptions. So Mark Andrews is the man there. Now, to your point with Kelsey and Kittle, both of those guys last year had 86% snap percentage on their respective teams, which is huge. That's obviously double what Mark Andrews had last year. So if you were to give Mark Andrews that many snaps, I think he has at least the production that Kelsey and Kittle did. So when you look at it as far as an opportunity versus like definite regression, which I agree that the Ravens in general will have regression at some point. But if you look at it in that Mark Andrews did a lot with a little last year, which does scream regression usually. But it's not like a bunch of people got hurt and he jumped into an opportunity like Zach Ertz maybe, where all of his fucking receivers 2 years in a row have just disappeared. So he's been a complete hog. Like everybody was around last year for the Ravens. I just think that there's going to be more opportunity for Mark Andrews there. So I'm going to stick with it, man. He is my number 3 right now. He's ahead of Ertz, definitely ahead of Waller. And if I miss out on those first 2 guys, he's kind of my Dak Prescott, where I'm not sure I would reach for him in the 3rd or 4th round. But if he fell to the 5th and I was good at wide receiver and running back, I think I would take the upside on Mark Andrews and then grab a late round tight end in case he doesn't work out. But I see Mark Andrews being the guy potentially who could be number 1 overall this year if it's not Kelsey or Kittle.
Yeah, I know I mentioned on the tight end. I would say go back and listen to it, the tight end rankings video. I think I argue with the ADP, not the tight end ranking. And if you want to, I won't go into depth on numbers. So let's go back to the tight end rankings, probably towards the beginning, I would imagine. My kind of case for the snap share is not going to outweigh the touchdown regression because the snap share is not as great as I think people think it's really going to be. So I would just suggest going back and listening to the tight end rankings episode, probably towards the beginning, I would imagine.
Yep. But even again, he had 41% last year.
Mm-hmm.
Kelsey and Kittle had 86. All right. That's fucking ridiculous. Top among the position. Let's give Andrews 60%, right? So 19% more. That's a huge upgrade, man. That's almost 50% more snap share, which I just think is going to be a great opportunity. And again, the other tight end he's battling with is Nick Boyle, who is just frankly not a receiving tight end for the most part. So I do think the opportunity is there, and Lamar Jackson trusts him. So I like that there. Okay, man, let's jump into our alternates, and we'll get out of here for the tight end position. Who is your alternate for the tight ends?
Yeah, it's Jack Doyle. Yet again, go listen to the tight ends rankings episode. If you don't want to, I will break it down for you here. So basically, the new quarterback is Phillip Rivers. And Phillip Rivers' career average tight end finish in PPR was tight end 7. The average, Frank Reich, is the coach. His average tight end room in his career, 157 targets a season. And Jack Doyle had 13 targets inside the 20 last year, and Ebron had 10. Ebron is now gone. It's just an easy pick. This is another one where everyone's like, there's no upside, blah, blah, blah. That's the case for, I don't know why you would take, I don't even know. Like, who's going down there? O.J. Howard, like Jay Sternberger down in tight end 15 to 18 range. So buy into the coaching history, the quarterback history, and not to mention his competition is a rookie, Michael Pittman. Paris Campbell, 51% chance for injury, and T.Y., 46.2% chance for injury, and a trio of running backs that only boost the receiving weapons because the team has to worry about how to defend 3 really good running backs. So I think he's going to be a guy where it's not going to be pretty to put him in your lineup. You're not going to be like, oh, yeah, I'm playing Jack Doyle. But then he's going to score you 10 points a week with the chance to what we saw Ebron score, what he had 13 touchdowns the 1 year, 15, whatever it was.
13.
Definitely in his wheelhouse this year. For I think this team's gonna be a lot better than people think they are.
That's a great call, man. And again, if you're waiting on late round tight ends, I think you could absolutely do worse than Jack Doyle. And I know that you've been repping him for quite a while, and that's gonna be your guy that you're stomping on there for the late round tight end, which I like. I'm gonna do the same thing with the late round tight end here and go with Jonnu Smith. And actually, I've moved both of these guys into my top 12 here for tight ends. Most people are drafting them, outside their top 15 tight ends. I've got him inside the top 12, and I feel pretty good about it. Jonnu's inside my top 10 right now. I've got him at number 9. This just comes down to the athletic ability at the tight end position, man. I mean, the days of Jason Witten type tight ends are just going away. These guys are essentially either hybrid blockers or they're hybrid wide receivers, right? Like you mentioned a couple of times, George Kittle in college was not sexy. He was an H-back. He was a flanker, he was like, Juszczyk basically. But he was able to get it done. He got an opportunity as an actual tight end now, and he's a fucking monster. Jonnu Smith is the same thing, man. I don't put too much weight into it, but certain guys in the NFL say things, and you pay attention. Bill Belichick obviously does not throw shit around, and he was mentioning that he thought Jonnu Smith was straight up like one of the best tight ends in the NFL. That's a big deal. That's based on skill and ability more so than statistics, clearly, right? And obviously, Uncle Bill knows a thing or two about tight ends. Another big part of that is, the argument immediately is just like, okay, there's not enough passing to go around. There's not enough this and that. Like, there's a hard enough case to make for A.J. Brown, whatever. Corey Davis is kind of around still. Derrick Henry runs the ball fucking, 40 times a game, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I get it. However, since from 2013 through 2017, Delaney Walker, who at one point was a fucking phenomenal tight end for the Titans, had 100 targets in every season but one of those. If Jonnu Smith can double his targets and get anywhere close to 80, 90 to 100, I think he could easily put up, 800 yards and 6 to 8 touchdowns. We say it all the time. That right there is going to be a top 6 tight end. And you're getting him in the, 12th, 15th round. The upside's there. And again, if I go late round tight end, I just toss him out and I get a new one because that's how it goes. But if I don't get an early tight end and I end up with Jack Doyle and Jonnu Smith as my 13th and 14th round picks, there's a no lose situation there. And I think both of those guys could have huge upside. And as we know, it doesn't take much to be a top 6 tight end and have week winning opportunity. And I think Jonnu Smith is a rare tight end who could score a 60-yard touchdown, but he's also a big red zone opportunity. And I think he could gobble up targets now that Delaney Walker is officially gone, who he was kind of behind the last 2 years. So Jonnu Smith is my guy there for the tight end position alternate. All right, man. You had Kelsey and Doyle. I had Andrews and Jonnu Smith as our tight end early gamers. We're going to revisit this in August and see if these guys hold up or if we have new names. But that feels good to me, man. I feel good about all these guys. You and I agree on almost everybody. There's a couple names in here maybe we would put off each other's list, but otherwise we feel pretty good about it. So if you're drafting now for some reason, which you should not be, but if you are, take these guys into consideration. Quarterbacks, Dak Prescott, Gardner Minshew, Big Ben Roethlisberger. Running backs, Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery, Austin Eckler, Zach Moss. Wide receivers, DK Metcalf, Juju Smith-Schuster, Julian Edelman, Tyler Lockett. Tight ends, Mark Andrews, Jonnu Smith, Travis Kelce, and Jack Doyle. All right, on the next episode, we are going to get into 5 hot takes each, 10 hot takes. We're not really a hot take podcast or brand, but this is something kind of fun that we want to look ahead of time here to make some bold predictions, if you will. But I think hot takes are a little bit more than bold predictions. We'll explain on the next episode. But we hope you have ordered your draft guide. If you haven't yet, go to tckpod.com and pre-order your draft guide or hit the link in the description below and make sure you give us your email address and let us know which package you would like, and we will get those out to you on July 6th. Very, very excited about that, and we will be following up very shortly again once that drops with information on the TCK Pod Listener League. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at fantasyfootball_TCK Pod and on Twitter at TCK_pod. Leave a rate and review on the podcast, please. Share wherever you're listening to your podcast, and make sure to subscribe right here to the YouTube channel and leave a comment on who your gamers are at each position. For Lucas Kaser, I'm Sky Guasco. This is another episode of the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast, and we are out of here.